Hi and welcome to What's Not to Like, and today we're looking at Railroad Revolution, which has been designed by Marco Canetta and Stefania Nicolini. And the first thing that struck me when I was asked to play this game was that this game is about American railroads development and also the telegraph system, which is in itself quite interesting, putting those two things together. And yet it seems, and I'm not absolutely certain on this, but it seems to me that this is probably designed by a European group of people, I'm presuming Italians by the names, and Pegasus Spiel have been involved in the production of the game. So I'm looking at that and thinking, well, you know, here is a Euro game about American subject matter, and straight away that raises that little bit of old tension that has existed in the hobby for a good number of years about how the American market, to some extent, sees itself coming out of, I think, the traditions of Avalon Hill and before that SPI games, a sort of simulation tradition where if it was a military game, it would be a matter of getting that military detail as accurate as possible and really pursuing it through the game using the thematic materials. Whereas the Eurogame tradition, it's very hard to sort of tie these things down absolutely, of course, but that seems to me to be a tradition based on the idea that the game is the thing and the most important element is the game. And so one of the criticisms often of Eurogames is that the theme has been bolted on, that the mechanics come first and then you get the theme on top. Now, I'm not saying in this game that that's the case, but I am interested in looking at that particular aspect of the design here. That's what interests me as a designer, coming to a game that's come from Europe. It's about America, and presumably that to some extent is because it's a good subject matter and also perhaps there's a good marketing angle on that as well. That's what hit me straight away when I started playing this game. So we're going to come back to that at the end. First of all, let's talk about some of the really good things I think that are in this game, because I think it's some really nice ideas. It's a familiar theme, and Peter, our host for the night, loves railway games. There's been lots and lots of railway games, as you all know, and this is a new one with a slightly new slant because it has the coupling it with a telegraph system being built at the same time. And I think that's a nice dualistic way of presenting a theme. Gives you a little more angles to work on with the game, because obviously there's a danger when you do railway games that you're kind of doing the same old, laying track, getting to places, getting some points out of that as you go along in different ways. This game chooses to do it as a track laying system. There is no movement across the board other than the laying of track. The trains don't actually move, so you're quite limited. So having that second element there is a really good gaming device to give you something to work with in the game, and I think it works really, really well. For a start, to build a telegraph office, it doesn't cost any money, and I think that's quite nice because you really can develop without having to have money. And what it does allow you to do, though, what you do have to do with the telegraph office, you have to discard one of your workers, and by discarding a worker, that can be to your advantage, but you can't run too short of workers. But it is an advantage to do that because you can then strengthen your hand. Now, come on to the second thing about the workers, which I think is another really, really nice system here. The multicoloured workers, and different workers allow you to do different benefit bonuses. So every worker can do the basic action, but if you have the orange worker, you get a series of options for the action that is a bonus action. If you have the purple worker, same again, you've got some bonus actions. Then the light blue worker, the turquoise worker, grey worker. Only the white workers are allowed just to do the primary action. They don't get the benefit action. And those are the ones, of course, you'll discard with the telegraph officers. So the telegraph office system has a bit of hand management characteristics there. The game we played the other day was Great Western Trail, and in that you have the hand management of trying to discard some of the weaker cards from your hand. Well, that works the same with these workers here. So really, really nice, tight system there. And finally, I think the use of the engines, the locomotives in the game, is nice and novel. It has perhaps a little bit of feel of Snowdonia. You get a regular benefit from the particular engine you have, and if you When you use that benefit, you flip it over and you therefore lose your victory points at the end. So you wanted to flip them back again, either to use them again or to get the endpoint victory conditions. So it's a really nice system within the game. And I think it's quite typical of what a Euro game will do. A Euro game will look to get some gaming mechanics out of the thematic mechanics that can really then drive the game forward. So I think those are particularly strong mechanics and it works very, very well. So thinking more about this Euro game angle on it, what are the things that characterise this game that kind of make you realise it's coming from that Euro tradition? Well, if you take those telegraph offices again, I think one thing you'll notice on those is that when you place the buildings on the telegraph offices, you're not restricted as to which position to place them in. It's maybe 10 spaces. You can place them at the end or the middle, wherever so choose, depending on the gaming needs of your play at that time. That is to some extent is to sort of twist the theme quite a bit, because you can only imagine that as those railway lines were built heading west, the telegraph offices would actually go in sync with those railway buildings over the line. It wouldn't have a telegraph office starting at the other end and then one in the middle out of the blue. So I think this is where the Eurogame designer feels quite liberated when they design a game. They don't feel they have to be constricted by the theme. They use the theme to generate a mechanic which then they can operate and be quite flexible with if they so choose. Similarly, when a player decides to join two stations together, they can use the same connecting spaces as another player. And so can another player, and so can the fourth player if need be. So you can end up with 4 railway lines all going from one city to another city. And I mean, I suppose it may have been possible in some instances you'd have more than one railway line from a company going that way, but actually physically, of course, you wouldn't have had 4 railway lines joining cities like that as separate tracks. But of course it doesn't matter, and we all know thematically that it's kind of engineering it to say it's really just a hypothetical connection. But that's where the Eurogamer has, I think, a real advantage. They don't feel constrained by that physicality of the situation. So is there any real disadvantage to this Euro system of designing games where the game takes precedence over the theme, allowing greater flexibility? I think there is, because I think if the strength of the theme is compromised too much, I think people find it much more difficult to engage with the game as a whole. I don't think they can throw themselves into the experience in quite the same way. I find abstract gaming fascinating in lots of ways. I started off playing chess and drafts and dominoes and all those sort of great traditional games, and I do enjoy some abstract games. But I much more enjoy a game, especially in those sort of games night contexts where you're playing with friends, where you feel you're really embracing a theme and kind of getting involved in it. And I think that is the criticism that does come against the Eurogame at times, is that it can be too heavily compromised. I think there is a certain point in the middle of the whole tradition that sits best with me, and that's the sort of game we try to design, to be honest. And I don't think we always achieve it quite as well as we might, but that is what inspires me to have a game that people kind of associate with the theme and yet feel it's a tremendously strong game. Anyway, those few thoughts on this game and the tradition and the hobby overall. I hope you find of some interest, and hope to see you again soon on What's Not to Like. Thank you.